to the inauguration and beyond. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about on today's podcast. Going to the inauguration, what was that like, and everything that has taken place since. All that coming up on 1819 News, the podcast.
We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy.
Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. I'm Brian Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of this here podcast, where we are in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week. It's going to be a lot more national focus this week, as you can, kind of tell by the news cycle, be it on Twitter, be it on wherever. Pretty big things happening in the nation, and we want to talk about that, and I'll tie it in a nice little bow at the end about how that applies to us in Alabama. But overall, I'm just really excited about what's going on right now. Kind of the title to my podcast is To the Inauguration and Beyond. That's kind of the title to this one, I'm thinking. But that's it. I got to go to D.C. I got to be there for the inauguration. I'm going to talk about my trip. I'm going to talk about what Trump has done since he was sworn in, and really just a little bit of history of how we got here. How did we get to the point where we had a president who finally understands what's at stake and the fact that we are at war with people who have declared war on us, our country, our nation, our heritage, our God, and our way of life. We're at war. We've been at war for a very long time, but Republicans have never figured it out. They just don't. They have not figured it out until now. Until January 20th. Finally, someone attained to power and wielded it for what is objectively good. Because there is something called objective truth. In the historic Christian realm, they called it the good, the true, and the beautiful, because there is objective good, there's objective truth, and there are things that are objectively beautiful. And people have undermined this obvious thing that we all know, that there is objectively good, true, and beautiful things. And we're going to get into that as well. But before I dive into this really excited podcast, I want to remind you guys, please go to our YouTube page. We're trying to build up our YouTube subscriber base. That is where the content happens. My last podcast, I interviewed Rick Burgess, and we talked about the launching of the Rick Burgess Show, the story behind that. If you missed it, you're going to want to go back and see. And we've got thousands and thousands of views. And so hopefully that gives us a boost on our subscribers. We used to get kind of, before we were unceremoniously removed, we used to get, thousands and thousands of views on every single podcast. We got booted from YouTube, tried out Rumble. It just never worked out quite as well as it did on the this amazing, platform that is YouTube that isn't a big fan of people like me and people like you. But here we are. It is the way to reach the most amount of people. And so we're here, and we need your help to reach as many people as possible. Go there and subscribe. Just type in the search bar on YouTube, 1819 Podcast. The podcast will come up. Click it and subscribe. Like the podcast. Leave a comment. All of those things boost the algorithm to pump this content out onto people's feeds. So please, any help you can do on that. Also, take the podcast, share it on social media. Tell your friends. Tell them to subscribe. If you know that they're an 1819 News fan, tell them to go and do that. Like, subscribe, follow, share, all that stuff. Comment. And also sometimes the comment thread can be fun and we can interact. And that's another way for us to be able to interact in a way that we can't on like Apple Podcast or Spotify or something. So that's another advantage. So please go do that. Make that a priority. Please do that. People are always asking, what can we do to help? Well, you can always send us money. But if you're already doing that, you can always send us more. But you can also like, share, subscribe, follow, comment, all of those things. So please do that. It helps us out. And there you go. Now on to the meat of the content. To the inauguration and beyond. Here we go. So we have never seen anything like we are seeing right now. We have never. I am 40 years old. I was born under Reagan. As good as Reagan was, I have a daughter named Reagan. I have 5 daughters. One of them is named Reagan because I love Ronald Reagan. Okay. He was the president when I was born. I think he was a fabulous president. He didn't do anything like what Trump has been doing in the last 4 or 5 days. Okay. We have never, ever, ever seen a conservative who goes and actually attains power and wields it for what is objectively good. Because there is objective truth, and there is objective good, and there is objective beauty. We covered that earlier. And he has attained power, and he is wielding it for what is objectively good. And he has gone to war for us, on our behalf, for our nation, for our children, and our children's children. He has gone to war. He did not declare war, but he's realized that war has been declared on us. And he's not backing down. We've never seen anything like this before. I'm just like, I had to take Twitter off my phone again. Usually I don't have Twitter and Facebook on my phone. It gets distracting. It takes me away from being with my kids and things like that. So I keep it on my computer, and, once or twice a day, I'll check it on the computer and leave it. But when I went to DC for the inauguration, I went ahead and got Twitter and Facebook on my phone because I figured I'd be posting pictures, doing videos, and I did. And then I was hooked when I got back. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's doing this. Did you see this? Did you see this? And I had to take a break from all the winning because there's a lot of winning going on. But we're going to cover some of the things that he's done, but I want to tee up how we got here. That's what I want to open this podcast with, is how did we get to the point where we finally had a president a Republican president who's actually going out there and doing things. On Twitter, you're like, did you know you can actually just go do things? Well, we've been told every single Republican president, they come out there and they're very polished in their delivery and they speak and they're presidential and they roll out their perfect families with their perfect wife and talk about free markets and family values. And, we're going to show them by decreasing taxes. And they just get ran over for their entire presidency. Okay. From George H.W. Bush to George W. Bush to all the people they tried to force on us, the John McCain, the Mitt Romneys. Can you believe that Mitt Romney and John McCain were actually advertised and marketed to us as actual conservatives? Now that we've actually had a conservative in and we see what actual conservatism looks like, it's radically different. And at some point, I may do a podcast that breaks down. You hear people say rhino, Republican in name only. Okay, I mean, that's a fair term that kind of broadly gets into it. But I'm telling you, the real difference is neoconservative versus paleoconservative. This is all the books that I have been reading in the last few years, and really the book that radicalized me to send me down this road was The Death of the West by Pat Buchanan. But it's reading books about the conservative movement that dates back, 100 years. What were conservatives doing then versus, after World War II, and kind of this consensus where, anyway, I'm not going to get into it now. I always do that. I start going down a rabbit trail and then I forget what I was going to talk about. Anyway, we're staying focused, all the winning. We're going to talk about all the winning and how we got to the point where we're doing all this winning. But the real differentiator is neoconservative, neocons, versus paleoconservatives, paleocons, okay? Neoconservatives are basically just like the liberals on social issues and everything else, and then they bathe their liberal tendencies in things like free markets and taxes and all this other stuff. And again, those are objectively good things, okay? Free markets, good, okay? Free markets equal good, okay? Strong families equal good. All of these kind of things that we always hear, these are very, very good things, but if you remove it from morality, you can't have free markets without a understanding that there's things that are objectively good from a moral standpoint. You'll never have strong families if you don't understand that there's things that are objectively good from that standpoint. And so, again, this is neoconservatism versus paleoconservatism. This is going to be the conversation that I think you see being had over the next 4 years about what really separates someone like you've heard me talk about populism versus Chamber of Commerce Republican. That's very similar on those differentiators. And so you have a Donald Trump, and then you see a Mitt Romney, or Liz Cheney, and all of these people. You're seeing there's a huge divide between who's going to run the Republican Party, and it is now the actual conservatives. They are in control as of January 20th. So for far too long, conservatives have attained power only to sit on it and make attempts to reach across the aisle. Why would you reach across the aisle to someone who's trying to kill you and destroy your way of life? There is no reaching across the aisle. And again, the left knows this. They've been at war. I've always described it as they're coming at us with a hatchet and they're trying to chop us in the face, and we're just trying to say, like, hey, can't we get along? That's been the right's response to this war that's been declared on us by the left. Not anymore. So there was a time when the other side of the aisle wasn't objectively evil, where that type of statesmanship of reaching across the aisle was actually honorable and good for the country. Back when the left-right divide was like, well, I think we should have 30% taxes with a few extra social programs. Well, I think it should be 20% because I like business. Like when that was the conversation that was being had, it's like, yeah, we can actually work together across the aisle. That's not what it is. We're literally discussing on whether or not we should be able to, cut children's genitals off. Like that's part of the conversation. Should women be allowed to play, or excuse me, should men be allowed to play in women's sports and pummel them? And like, that's what we're actually talking about. So there is no reaching across the aisle with people who believe those things. So we're finally seeing someone who understands the times and what is taking place, attaining power and using it for what is objectively good. What did it take for Trump to get there? Because even in his first term, 2016 Trump was very, very good. Did amazing things, got lots accomplished, but nothing like we're seeing right now, what we've seen since the inauguration. Nothing like that. And so I'm going to walk back and just take you through a couple elements of what we're up against and what Trump was up against to get to where he is today. And I was on the Rick Burgess show and I talked about this. I talked a little bit about what was going on up in Washington, D.C. And he asked me at the end of my appearance on his radio show, he said, what does this day, this was on January 20th, this was the day of the inauguration, what does today, the January 20th, mean for the United States of America? And I immediately, and if you know me, I immediately went to the Marxist long march through the institutions, really coming from a guy named Gramsci. And it was this idea that it goes all the way back to the Russian Revolution. And the Russian Revolution made it sound like it was like Russians that took over Russia. That's not what it was. It was this, it was a Bolshevik revolution where the Bolsheviks, the Marxists, went and overtook Tsar Nicholas and slaughtered his family and killed him. And the revolutionaries took over Russia and turned it communist. And then communists started to try to move west, and they tried to move west by tank, and they could not win bringing communism by tank or by the sword. They couldn't take communism any farther west using war. And so they came up with the idea in the 1930s in the Frankfurt School to try and move communism, Marxism, ideology west through culture-shaping institutions, okay? And so the very first plant they made was in Columbia University. And from there, they sought to take over all the other Ivy League schools, and now they can completely control all of academia. They control seminaries, they control churches, they control high schools, middle schools, elementary schools now. They're everywhere now. They've infiltrated. It was a 100-year plan called the Long March through the Institutions, where they've captured every single one of our culture-shaping institutions. That would be the media, the news, entertainment, Hollywood. All of this stuff has been captured by people who hate Christ and who hate the Western civilization and want to destroy it. Okay. That is what is going on, is there's a people who hate God and the civilization that his people created called Western civilization, i.e. used to be called Christendom, where Christ has dominion, Christendom. Okay. Christ was reigning and ruling in the West. All of the kings were Christians. Okay. All of the laws were Christian. There was a thing called Christendom, which is another word for Western civilization. And these people wanted to destroy it. Okay. And I've always said Marxist ideology is anti-Christ. When people in the South hear anti-Christ, they're like, the rapture, he's coming next Tuesday. That's not what I mean when I say anti-Christ. When I say Marxism is anti-Christ, what I mean is it's polar opposite of that which God requires. And so whatever God says is good, the Marxists say is bad. Whatever God says is bad, the Marxists say is good. The ideology is literally antithetical to the Christian faith. The values and the customs and the laws and the mores and the ways and the heritage of the United States of America and Western Europe, okay, was built on this Christian foundation, and they are trying to flip it upside down, okay? And they've done that through capturing culture-shaping institutions and then filtering out their ideology into it to where the church is now talking about, we need to take in as many refugees as possible and preach the gospel to them. We don't need borders. We need an open society. And we're hearing that from the church. We're hearing that from the TV. We're reading that in the news, and we're bombarded with this idea that we need to have an open society with open borders and all this other stuff. And we've fallen for it. And right now people are waking up to that and they're fighting back. But it's a big deal. So anyway, this 100-year long march through the institution has basically swept through, untethered and really there's been no pushback against it. No one's really successfully fought back against it in a meaningful way. It's destroyed everything in its path. And now finally one man stood up and punched the bully in the face, right in the nose. And that was Donald Trump. But think about the resistance that he faced. Why? Like, even Ronald Reagan didn't face the resistance that Donald Trump did. George W. and H.W. certainly didn't face that kind of resistance. And John McCain and Mitt Romney and going back, they never faced the level of resistance. No president in history has ever faced the level of resistance as Donald Trump has, because he posed a legitimate threat to the regime, to these people who are trying to overturn our Western nations and our Western culture and our Western way of life. He represented a legitimate threat. And so they acted accordingly. From the time he came down the escalator in 2015 to today, think about the things that have transpired when they've come after him. And so obviously they played it off like he was never going to win, and everyone laughed. And I forget, it was Ann Coulter or who it was that got on there and said, I think Donald Trump's going to win. And they're all like, ha ha ha, that's never going to happen. And on and on. And they just, the Barack Obama, he goes, well, at least I was a president. Well, then he got elected. Okay. And when he got elected, immediately what happened? Russia, right? The fake Russia collusion. From there, impeachment. And meanwhile, while this is happening, every single day, every single major media outlet on the planet is calling him literally Hitler and saying he's a threat to our democracy and that he's undermining everything. Imagine what that would be like. I got a little taste of what it was like to be Donald Trump for about 3 weeks after the Bubba Copeland saga, where the pervert mayor and pastor and Smith Station in Phoenix City, when that came to a tragic end and he decided to take his life, I, Jeff Poore, and Craig Monger and 1819 News was blamed by the mainstream media for that. And so we got a taste of 3 weeks what it was like to be the front page news on the New York Times and the Washington Post. It's not easy. I'm telling you, like, we stood up to it. Praise God. We've got an incredible team full of people who are mission aligned, mission driven. And buddy, we stood up to it, but it was hard. It was hard. I can't imagine what it would be like to have that going on for, almost a decade now, since 2015. We're now in 2025. Okay. So it's almost a decade of that type of media coverage against one man, and he just keeps on going. And so Russia, the impeachment, the media, and then comes COVID. This is complete conjecture. I tend to believe, again, I always talk about, I'm a 30,000 foot guy. I look and see how things work together. And if something can make a very simple way of connecting something to make it make sense, I tend to lean towards that. Donald Trump was doing incredible things as a president and putting the United States of America first, like no president ever had before. And then all of a sudden, one of our major enemies, China, comes this virus, and we were told, that virus, the Jon Stewart thing was funny, where he's like, a penguin and a bat kissed and poof, out comes this virus. We were told in a wet market. Well, right away, the Epic Times was saying, no, there is a lab where they created this virus, and that's where it got leaked from. Okay. And that turned out to be true, but you would actually get kicked off of these platforms that I'm talking to you on right now if you even suggested that it came from a lab. 6 months later, it was just common knowledge that it came from a lab. So it was a manufactured virus that was released right when Trump was peak doing the most for America. Coincidence? I think not. I think there's probably some intentionality behind that, and they used that to steal the election. Again, I make no bones about it. I believe the election was stolen. Okay. And so now you're seeing Russia, the crazy media stuff. You're seeing impeachments. Then you're seeing COVID, and then you're seeing a stolen election. Again, who has ever experienced this type of resistance? Because he's a legitimate threat to the powers that be. They leave him alone for a little bit, and then he announces that he's going to run again in 2024. And what happens next thing you know, lawfare. They try and crush his business. They bring all these lawsuits. Then they bring criminal charges. He's indicted on tens, I think like 30 some odd counts, and all this lawfare going on. And, there was a mugshot of him, and we thought that was peak. This is it. The election's over. They actually have a mugshot of him. Well, it didn't stop there. It continued. Okay. It continued from the lawfare and him getting arrested. Imagine being Donald Trump, someone who's been a successful businessman your whole life, and you stand up for your country and you fight. And what is your thanks for that? They throw you in jail and there's an actual mugshot of you. But that rallied the people behind him even more. And it seemed like really from that point forward, every single thing they did to try and end Donald Trump only made him more popular. Go to July 13th, okay, 2024, Butler, Pennsylvania. You guys have heard me talk about this. I'll say it again. Here he is addressing a crowd of 20 or 30,000 or whatever it is, massive crowd, talking about, all the things he's done and what he's going to do, casting a positive vision for America, and shots ring out, kills the fire chief, Corey Contemporary. I don't know how to say his last name, and I don't want to dishonor him by not saying his name correctly. But he heard the shots ring out, and he's covering his children like the hero that he is, and he gets one of the bullets and he dies. Bullets flying, and one of those bullets hits Trump in the head, goes through his ear, okay, and he falls to the ground, and as he's gathering his composure and getting back up, and the Secret Service comes on stage, they try and drag him to safety off the stage, and he stops them, and he looks to the crowd with blood running down his face and the American flag behind him, and says, "Fight, fight, fight." Let me see if I've got this here. Hold on. There it is. The greatest image in political history in the United States of America. If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons, it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be BRYAN, Brian.Dawson, DAWSON at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you. So that moment, he looks to the crowd and says, "Fight, fight, fight," because he knows that we're at war and this is a fight, and they tried to kill him. And then they tried to kill him again, and they tried to kill him again. There was the shooter at Mar-a-Lago, and then there was the bomb sniffing dogs. They were training bomb sniffing dogs. There was all these explosives at one of the Trump rallies. That they kind of swept that under the rug and said, "Oh no, it was a bomb dog train sniffing exercise that we were doing outside of a Trump rally." Weird. Anyway, on and on it goes. And then after that, what do? They switched out they switched out Joe Biden for Kamala without a vote being cast, and on and on and on. We're seeing things we have never seen over and over and over and over and over again because of the threat that this man poses, and every single thing that doesn't work only reinvigorates him to come in and do exactly what it is that we've been seeing. Okay. And so this is a moment in the history of our nation. This is a moment that will go down in history forever. We'll look back to January 20th when he was sworn in, and really this whole election cycle, this 2024 election cycle. I was so fortunate to be at the RNC and to get to go to Milwaukee and see him speak. I was like 15 yards away from him when he came out and gave his first speech with the patch on his ear. That happened 2 days after. Well, the RNC started 2 days after he was shot. Such a historic time in our nation's history, and we all got to watch it. We've all been watching history be made. And man, has it been wonderful. So, I'm going to go through some of the things that he's done since he's became the president. I want to talk a little bit about, what it was like going to Washington, D.C. Thought it was very strange that, shortly before the inauguration started, they brought it inside. It was historically, I think maybe one time in the last 100 years, have they moved the inauguration inside. It's always in January. It's always freaking cold. It's cold in DC in January. Surprise. And so they moved the inauguration inside. Okay. And it was cold. I get it. It was cold, but sun was shining. It was like 23, 24 degrees or something like that. It's like Washington, DC, it gets cold. I mean, I think everyone was prepared for it to be pretty freaking cold, and they went anyway. But they moved it inside, and they said it was weather. And I joke and say whether there was a drone strike coming or whether there was a nuclear bomb, like weather what, right? That was what my feeling was, is that they moved it inside because there was a security threat. And buddy, security was pretty thick there, I will say. Now, at the RNC, it was way more thick. At the RNC, There was this big black steel gates everywhere. The perimeter was set. They had Humvees out with, military, and they had that this time too. But they had like U.S. Coast Guard helicopters, like, flying around the perimeter in Milwaukee. Security definitely felt thicker in Milwaukee than it did in D.C. for the inauguration. But I'll take that over, if that's the continuum of like Milwaukee over here, crazy security, and Butler, Pennsylvania over here. I want more of this, less of this. Where the the 17-year-old kid or whatever he was can like walk up with a rangefinder and like mark where the president's going to be, and like nobody does anything. It's like, yeah, no, that's not good security. We want some more of this Milwaukee security. Anyway, so the weather, it was really cold. Security was intense, but more than anything, I want to talk to you guys about the energy of being in Washington, D.C. with a bunch of patriots who were there to support the man who took all that beating that I just went through, the media beating, the lawfare, the impeachments and the fake Russia collusions and the investigations, the all of that stuff, and being arrested with a mugshot and taking bullets to the head and other threats to his life. And he just kept going, and he kept going, and he kept going. And you know what he said when he gave his speech? Opened with, "I know that God spared my life so that I could make America great again." This is a man who knows why he's here, and he knows what his purpose is, and nothing's going to stop him. We've never experienced anything like this, guys, ever. So the actual inauguration, interesting things of note. There was the swearing in without the Bible. That was one of the first things that someone pointed out to me. I think Justice Roberts hurried him, and Melania wasn't able to get over there in time to put the Bible where it needed to be. Shame on that man once again. But it was a beautiful setting. And while I wished it would have been outside, so I would have got to see it in real life, I at least didn't have to nearly freeze to death. So I guess I'm, if I'm going to be half, glass half empty, glass half full, if I'm being an optimist, I was able to be at a really nice restaurant watching it on the TV, with some really cool people. And, it was beautiful. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. The way that they did it, the music, his speech, I mean, the whole thing. And man, when I was watching him speak, I teared up. I admit it. I got choked up. I got teared up. And I think everybody in the room with me, and I think everybody watching, realized what that moment was. I think everyone got a little bit choked up. I think everyone was wiping tears watching him speak, thinking about everything that he's been through for us, for our nation, for our children and our children's children and generations to come. One man has stood up to all of this. It's unbelievable, really and truly. I got teared up watching that, so I'll admit it. Think about the music. Maybe they do this every inauguration. I never noticed it, but the Battle Hymn of the Republic, that's worth going and listening to. Just punch it in on YouTube. Glory, glory, hallelujah, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. A very Christ-centered hymn that is the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And man, when he finished his speech and got done being sworn in, and the military choir came in singing glory, glory, hallelujah, and go look at the lyrics of that song, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Again, goosebumps just all down my spine. Just whoa, something powerful is taking place. Something larger and bigger than life and the natural. Okay, something supernatural is taking place. I'm not saying that Donald Trump is supernatural, but what I am saying is that I believe God has used him, has chosen him as a vessel to give us our nation back. Okay, and I think that's undeniable now, with watching the bullet barely miss his head, to seeing the things that he's done since he's taken office. You guys have never seen me go on like a full like pro-Trump tirade. You've never seen me do that. Okay, I've tried to stay pretty. I get a little excited and I let it out sometimes. I like the guy, but I believe he deserves what I'm doing right now, to talk about what he's been through and what he's done. And he's done it for us. And he always said, "They're not after me, they're after you. And I just happen to be standing in the way, and I'm not going anywhere." And he means that. And he's shown that. That's not just rhetoric. He's shown that over and over and over again. So another thing that I think is worth talking about is on the music front. I noticed this when I was in Milwaukee for the RNC. When the RNC ended, there was this Italian opera singer, okay? And everything Trump does is choreographed and planned and thought out and thought through, and it's messaging to the max. Everything he does, every song he plays, everything he does, he's sending a message. He's P.T. Barnum, okay? He's a showman. That's how he's gotten to where he is today. He is a marketer and businessman extraordinaire, and he understands how to put on a show. Trump rallies, like who else has ever done that, right? And just tens of thousands of people show up for him every single time. He's a showman, and he is always communicating something. And so I watched as the RNC was so just magically and wonderfully done. Incredible job by the people who put that together back in July and August. But at the end of the RNC, when the balloons dropped down onto the floor where all the delegates were, there was an Italian guy, I assume he's Italian, and he was up there singing this opera song. I have no idea what he was saying. I have no idea what he was singing, but it was obviously opera, and it was very distinct that he was singing that as the balloons dropped all over the floor and all over the stadium. Balloons were dropping, and this opera song was going on. And you'll notice in the inauguration, that same guy was there singing that same song. Well, let me tell you what I believe I know about that song. It's got to be true because I saw it on Twitter. Okay, well, I went back and watched the movie to make sure that it was true. So the movie, The Sum of All Fears, I might butcher this. I've seen it a few times. Is in the Jack Ryan series. It's a Tom Clancy book turned into a movie, though it doesn't have Harrison Ford. Ben Affleck plays Jack Ryan in this one. And in it, there are people who want America to go to war with Russia. And so these people kind of create a coup and set off a nuclear bomb at a football game in the United States of America as a way to get Russia to go to war with America to start this massive world war. And at the end of the movie, they figured out who it was that did it. And at the end of the movie, they track down every single one of those people that did that and execute them, to the point where some of them, they just went up and like shot them in the head. Okay. Do you know what song was playing when these executions and this retribution and this retaliation was taking place? Well, you guessed it. It was the opera song from the RNC and the inauguration, that exact same opera song. Trump is sending a message. He's at war, and he's coming for the people who did this, not only to him, but to his family and to his country and to all of us patriots. Okay. He's coming for them. That should give you goosebumps. Okay. I encourage you to go look it up, go watch Sum of All Fears and listen to that scene. You can probably just YouTube that particular scene, the ending scene of Sum of All Fears, or the retribution scene. That song was playing. So I think even Melania's dress communicated that same thing. It would look like something from Via's for Vendetta. I mean, she looked like she was serious, and everyone's like, man, why isn't she smiling? I don't know, because all these people that are up there on stage with her tried to kill her husband on multiple occasions and made her life a living hell for the last 10 years. Maybe that's why she's not smiling, right? And think about the speech that he gave where he just verbally chastised those people, and they're sitting right there. Just let them have it. Again, we've never seen anything like this. This is unique. We need to take this in, and we need to say, this is what leadership looks like. This is what we expect of those who would seek to rule us, those who would have authority over us. This is what they should look like. Anyway. So now let's go into what Trump has done since being sworn in. There's no way. I mean, it's been a week, and I don't have enough time on this podcast to go through every single thing he's done. Okay. It's just an absolute barrage of these, wow, I'm losing the word, the executive, whatever. I don't know why I'm forgetting the word, but he's putting into action all of these things with his pen, okay, to undo everything that Obama and Joe Biden, that's what I call him, that they've done. Because that when Obama came in, that was when it reached its peak of taking the mask off and taking the gloves off, that they were in a full bore Marxist revolution against our nation and against the West. Obama was the unmasking of it. Okay. He would always say, you know, I love my country, but we need to fundamentally change it. Well, if my old boss Lee Habib used to say this. He'd say, well, imagine if I went to my wife and said, honey, I love you, but we need to fundamentally change you. I don't think she would believe how much I loved her. Right. And so, under what Obama did, and even these weak Republicans before him that set up Obama, that the Bushes were full on open society, new world order globalists. Okay. These were not conservatives. These were not people who actually believed in the Republican Party. It's hard for some people to hear, but I'm telling you, go look into it. George Bush, after being in the CIA, came out and was making speeches about the new world order. It was about the open society. It was about open borders, open trade, open this, global that. They were globalist. And then from there, it went from the open society globalist right into full-on communist Marxist Obama and everything that he ushered in, and Hillary was supposed to take it to the finish line. And this guy, this New York Democrat billionaire, decided he would run for president and put a stop to it. I mean, it's the stuff movies are made of, right? God writes good stories. And so here we are. And so he's now going in and one at a time undoing the things that have been done with executive action. He's undoing it. And eventually, I believe he's going to work to get the legislature to catch up to what he's been doing with executive orders. So let's start. Literally immediately he got to work signing these. And the first one that really stuck out to me was rounding up illegals. And he tweeted out yesterday, he said, we got to get these numbers up, guys. We're only doing 350 to 500 immigrants a day. We need to get that up to like 1,400 or 1,500. I didn't think it was ever going to happen. I didn't think they were we've never seen that. I did a whole podcast on, do you have the stomach for revival? Do you have the stomach for what it's going to take to fix the nation? We're going to see illegal aliens. We're going to see raids where, people decked out in tactical gear kick in doors and go and start putting people in zip ties and hog tying them and throwing them onto a bus and putting them on a plane and parachuting them back into where they belong. Do you have the stomach for it? Well, he's actually doing it. I was confident that he was going to do it, but I still thought, I'm like, I don't know, man. Is that going to happen? What's happening? So much so that he put on the White House, their public page, and they used social media to pump this image out. It was like the official White House, stuff. And it was the C-130 with a bunch of handcuffed illegals loading up on a plane. And at the top, it said, promises made, promises kept. Amazing. I really when I get on Twitter, I don't know what to do with all the winning. So much winning. And in 2016, he's going to say, you're getting tired. You're going to get tired of all the winning. Are you tired of all the winning yet? Well, I never got tired of it in 2016. Quite frankly, I am a good exhausted from all the winning because it's been lots. And so rounding up illegals, then he's not satisfied with the number. We got to get those numbers up, guys. We need about 1,500 a day. That's what we need. Cheers, President Trump. Cheers. Hear, hear. Getting woke out of the military and our government, ending DEI in every aspect of the federal government. Okay? This man is wielding the authority that has been entrusted to him for the good of the country and the citizens. Wielding power. We've never seen a Republican do this before. Every single time they are weak, they are pansies, they are cowards. And the real shame in it is, I believe Donald Trump he certainly acknowledges God. He's probably a Christian after he got shot in the head. That's probably my guess. Again, I don't have regeneration goggles to see if someone's been saved. But I would probably lean towards that right now. But the real shame is that all of these Christian Republican guys that have been in office with their perfect families and they're, never been divorced and they're so perfect and they say all the nice things and they never did anything. It literally took a New York Playboy Democrat that used to give money to Planned Parenthood, who loved his country, to come in and go to war. And as he went to war, he began to see why we believe the things that we do on the conservative side. And he became a real conservative after not being one his entire life. But it took that, okay? It takes Elon Musk, who's not a Christian. It takes Joe Rogan, who's not a Christian. It takes RFK, who's not a Christian. These are the people who've shown courage and fought. Why is it us who are Christians, who believe in Christ and know that we have life eternal spent in the heavenly places? Why are we scared? What are we scared of losing? But these people who are not Christians have showed us what courage looks like. We should be ashamed as Christians that we have not been able to get someone into power and have that person exercise power for what is objectively good. And a lot of it has to come from the weak watering down of the message coming from the churches, which gets back to the fact that Marxists have hijacked our seminaries and our churches. But I digress. Moving on. Pete Hegseth being sworn in 51-50. that was close. And a lot of people are saying that number actually means, well, look, I mean, all the other ones were like 93-7 and 98-2 and da-da-da-da-da-da. He must be horrible because it was 51-50. No, you're wrong. These people don't want him in because they know he's going to do what needs to be done. And so 50 people voted against him. 50 people who hate America, who hate you and hate your children and hate your God and hate your church and hate your everything. 50 of them hate it so much that they voted against him when it was normal to go ahead and vote for the cabinet members because they weren't going to do anything different than the next guy anyway. And then there was Republicans who didn't vote for him, and they voted for the dude in a dress and these weirdos and stuff like that. But here comes Pete Hegseth, and oh no, he's not qualified. Well, what were the qualifications of the people that were in there before? Really? Anyway, so he was sworn in 51-50. This is a man who, again, I don't know how much you've studied church history. I'm a huge church history buff. You can see all the books in my background. Those are the Calvin commentaries and the Calvin's Institutes and all kinds of other church history books in the background. This man has a Deus Vult tattoo, which is a slogan from the Crusades tattooed on his bicep, okay, which means the Lord wills. And so they would go to war and fight for what was objectively right and risk their lives, and thousands of them would die, and they would conquer, lands that were Muslim ruled, where Christians were under Muslim slavery, where they're being raped and all kinds of other horrible stuff. They would go in and fight and die to save these people. And no matter what happened, they would say, Deus Vult, the Lord wills. And that's what he has tattooed on his arm. Okay. And he's got an iron cross on his chest and has literally openly said that women shouldn't serve in combat roles. Okay. And still became the Secretary of Defense. What? That is insane. I mean, 2-3 years ago, when I very first started 1819 News, I mean, I don't believe women should be in combat roles. I don't. I've hinted at it, but he's come out and just said it, and now he's the Secretary of Defense. The Overton window is moving like crazy. And again, if someone wants to debate, oh, well, I know a girl who can do 5 pull-ups and she shot some people, and I get it. We don't make rules off the exception. Okay. The rule is that men are stronger and they were built for war, and women were made to nurture, okay, and to raise children and those things. That is the rule. That is the way God created it. Could you find some masculine woman that could probably beat me up? Yeah, but there's not many of them, okay? So we don't need to make rules based off the exception. We need to make rules based off the rule. We need to go with the way that nature is, and we need to play into that. I think you could even make a case that the Bible says that women are not supposed to serve in combat roles, where the scripture talks about it's an abomination for a man to put on women's garb and for a woman to put on a man's regalia. What is regalia? That means like clothed for war. That's the way that the language reads. It's an abomination, which means it's a sin that actually gets into the air, earth, and water and pollutes, okay, like homosexuality, okay? That sin actually begins to ruin society. And it says that we know for sure that a man who puts on women's clothing, we're seeing that all over the place, but we never think that a woman who puts on battle gear is committing the same sin that a man putting on a dress is, right? And so the Bible, I think, is pretty clear about that. Again, that's extremely controversial. Can't wait for the hate mail, whatever. But we have a Secretary of Defense who says the exact same thing. So maybe I'm in good company. Who knows? Maybe I'll be the next Secretary of Defense. Probably not. Anyway, moving on. Pardoning J6ers. Promises made, promises kept. 1,500 J6 people. I think there was 6 that might have actually committed real crimes that they're going to investigate before giving them pardons. Caleb Dillard, if you remember, he was on my podcast not long ago. He got pardoned. He's done. His sentence is now over. He has no more parole and no more felonies. He's done. He's pardoned, and he can go back to life as normal. Isn't that amazing? 15 or 1,600 people, I think he pardoned. Then he ended birthright citizenship. That's another super controversial one. Again, it's probably not going to surprise you what my position on that is. I think in order to be, you can't just like sneak over the border and pop out a baby and be like, "Oop, it's American now." There's nothing magic about our soil that means like when your toes like dip into the sand on the beach from the, the water body of water you just crossed to get here, your toes kind of spread into the sand and you're like, "I'm American now." That's not what it means to be American. That's not what our forefathers fought and died for. And fought at Valley Forge and all these, wars in order to secure a place for their people. Okay. There's a lot more to being an American than just you made it over the border and now you're here and you're good now. Like, that's not it. You know, I listened to a podcast where he broke it down and he goes, all right, basically all it means to be an American is that you're here now. It doesn't matter about your heritage, your custom, your religion, your nothing. That doesn't matter. Us and our fathers, we built this nation, and then you guys come over here and like that was our part. We built it, and then you guys get to come over here and just like, you know, get all the benefits from it. So that's this wonderful deal that we've got in our immigration system. We're gonna have to start really thinking about what does it mean. I'm probably gonna do a podcast on that. I think I will. What does it mean to be an American? We've never thought about this. We've just been hammered and indoctrinated into this melting pot, we're a nation of immigrants thing. It's not true. That's not what our founding fathers envisioned for the United States of America. That is not why they fought and died. Look at the documents that they wrote and what it says at the top of these documents, who it was for, why they fought. Okay, so we're going to have to start really defining terms as they're rounding up illegal aliens and throwing them onto C-130s and flying them back to where they're from. We need to discuss what it actually means to be an American citizen. It could be like, we could have people over here that are on work visas. That's fine, but they don't need to be voting. They don't need to be participating in our, you know, all these other things. And, you know, in the Bible, it talks about to the, you know, the second and third generation before they actually had real citizenship. It was this long process of, assimilating to our ways. I've always said immigration without assimilation is invasion. I know some people who are over here on the dreamer status. They were like 2 years old or whatever when they came over here. They've never known anything but America. They speak perfect English. They're incredible employees. They're wonderful people. We need to have something set up to where you can interview those people and talk to them and be like, no, like you actually have completely assimilated. You are more of an American as far as everything that you do than the vast majority of Americans. There needs to be something for those people, and we need to realize that. But overall, that's not what has been happening. That's not the norm. Again, so what we don't make rules off the exceptions. That would be the exception. Everyone's like, well, I know some guys too that should totally get to stay here, 100%. But we don't make rules based on the exception. Okay, we make rules based off of what the rule is. What is the normal thing that we're seeing with this immigration process? So ending birthright citizenship, but he's swaying. I mean, the swing on that, he was swinging for the fences. I said swang. That probably, I don't know if that's swang. Anyway, swinging for the fences at Fenway on that one, going over the green monster, ending birthright citizenship. That's something. My whistles. I got to work on my whistle, guys. I'm probably going to need a bottle of water next time I come and do one of these monologues because I've been talking a long time. Moving on. Classifying cartels and sex traffickers as a clear and present danger. He used another term, but I'm a Tom Clancy guy, as I said, and there's a book and a movie called Clear and Present Danger, and it basically sums up the same thing. Our military is now classifying these cartels that are sex trafficking and bringing fentanyl that's killing Americans in droves as a threat to our national security, and he's fixing to take care of it, okay? Everybody thinks the cartels are big and bad. I forget, it was probably a Sean Ryan podcast where he's always bringing these special forces guys. They're like, well, what would happen if like the special forces went after the cartels? They're like, oh my God, it would be over in a heartbeat. Like, yeah, they're big, they're bad, they're scary. I mean, they're ruthless. They are ruthless. But even in our kind of weakened military state, our special forces would absolutely annihilate those people. And I think that might happen. And that would be good. So classifying cartels and sex traffickers as clear and present danger is a threat to our national security, and that we're going to act accordingly. Man, crazy. And you know what I think is going to happen? I think that every single time he does a promises made, promises kept, he's going to video it and he's going to put it on White House social media. This is what I'm doing, and I'm doing it for you. We've never seen anything like this. This is all new. This is all unique. This is all conservatives have ever dreamed of, okay? We're finally getting it, and we're getting to see it. And we just need to pray for Trump's safety as he continues to do this for us. And finally, I'm going to wrap up with this. I mean, I could go on and 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 on with his executive orders that he's signing and the things that he's doing, because it's a lot. But I'm going to finish with this, and then I'm going to bring it back to Bama. Bring it back to Bama, baby. This is the most pro-life president ever. Not in his rhetoric, but in his action. Not in his rhetoric, but in his action. He knew he had to get elected. So, and I think he understands this is his position on abortion, is he believes there should be exceptions for rape and incest. I have friends in the Christian movement whom I love dearly. These are my brothers, but they can't see the forest for the trees on this, where they did not vote for Donald Trump because of his stance on abortion. I'm like, bro, you're talking about the guy that overturned Roe versus Wade. No one has done more for Christians, and no one has done more for the unborn than this man. Well, he said he believes in exceptions, and I need perfection to vote for him. It's like, golly. And another way of saying it is like, if we don't have a nation, you can't outlaw abortion in America if you don't have an America. So like, we need to win our nation, and then we can figure out what's going to go on inside of that nation. We were at a existential crisis as a nation. What is an existential crisis? It means that if the crisis doesn't go our way, we don't exist as an existential anymore, right? And that's what we're up against. And so being a one-issue voter when things are this bad, I don't know. And again, I got those same friends. They're still defending their position on why they didn't vote for him and whatever, blah, blah, blah. I just hope that they're happy, though. Like, I don't care. Whatever. I'm not going to sit here and beat people over the head. Trump won. That's all that matters. He's doing more than any president has ever done for so many other areas, but he is the most pro-life president ever, okay? So he pardoned pro-life protesters. Not long ago, prior to Trump taking office again, under the Biden-Harris regime, pro-life protesters were being thrown in prison for exercising their First Amendment right to try and protect the unborn. They would go out to abortion facilities and preach Christ and him crucified, okay? People doing amazing work. They were actually being arrested, okay? I don't know if you saw that video where the FBI showed up to this guy's house. He's like a Christian dad with like 4 or 5 kids, and they go in there and round him up, and the kids are like, Daddy, no! I mean, you can't imagine what that must be like. They've been pardoned now, thanks to Donald Trump, the most pro-life president ever. Okay. And just think about that. Though, everyone's like, we need to move the FBI to Huntsville. And I'm like, have you seen what the FBI is doing lately? I don't know if I want the FBI in Huntsville. Well, now that it's under Trump, I think so. And if he can put some fail safes in place to where it never turns into the weaponized law enforcement system that goes to round up people who disagree with the school boards and such. So if you guys remember, I brought Angelo Fermo on. He was a Homeland Security guy, and when he decided he was going to retire is when they were, this dude spent his entire career like hunting down cartel members and hunting down terrorists and like doing all this amazing work. And then he comes into work one day and they're like, all right, guys, so what we need to shift our focus to now is these parents that don't like that we're letting men in women's bathrooms and are being loud about it. So we're going to use the power of the federal law enforcement to go after them. He's like, deuces, retired. Anyway, no more federal dollars to abortion, citing the Hyde Amendment. Why has no Republican president done this? None of them ever overturned Roe versus Wade. Donald Trump did. None of them cut off federal funding and cited the Hyde Amendment. I don't know because I saw that he did that executive order, and then I saw people asking him to cut off federal funding to Planned Parenthood. I don't understand, if he cut off federal funding to abortion, how is Planned Parenthood? So there maybe because all those other great services for women that Planned Parenthood does, sarcasm if you can't hear that in my voice, okay? Maybe that's what some of that federal funding is going to. I anticipate that getting cut off abruptly. But either way, no more federal dollars going to abortion, and he cited the Hyde Amendment, and he overturned Roe versus Wade. This is America's most pro-life president, okay? You can sit and argue and make all these cases and do all these cartwheels to get out of the fact that he is. There's people who had a better verbal position that they articulated. Their rhetoric was more pro-life than Trump's, but no one's actions have been more pro-life, okay? I'm going to end my Trump fest to the inauguration and beyond. I'm going to wrap that part up and finish with this, guys. This is my question. We've now been privileged to see what leadership looks like, what real conservative leadership and executive authority looks like. We've seen it now. We know what can be done. In the first one in 2016, how many presidents promised that they were going to move the embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I don't really care about that. Not my thing. I don't know what that means. I don't know what the significance was, but here's the deal. So many presidents promised they were going to do it, and they got in office and said they couldn't do it. Well, he did it. Again, don't know what that means. Obviously, it was a big deal because all these presidents promised to do it and didn't, and he did, okay? He's showing us how easy it is to actually get things done and keep your promises. And what he's doing when he does that is he shows how easy all of this was up to this point, okay? And no one did it, which means we were being lied to the entire time. So we've now seen executive leadership. We know what it looks like. Where is our Donald Trump in Alabama? Who's going to be the person that does whatever is necessary to rid our state from the nonsense that we see on a daily basis? Who is going to be the person who rids us of the nonsense we see on a daily basis? It's absolute ridiculousness. There's no leadership in the state at all at levels where it needs to be. And when I say there's no leadership, and what I mean by that, there's three positions. You have a Speaker of the House, you have a Senate pro tem, and you have a governor. Those are the people who drive what's happening legislatively in this state. We've got an incredible Attorney General. We got a new Senate pro tem. We haven't really gotten to see what he's going to do yet, so this doesn't apply to Garland. But historically, what we've seen since I've been paying attention to Alabama politics, we'll even go back 10 years since I've been in Alabama, we've not seen it. We've not seen leadership. We've watched people manage who gets to feed at the trough of federal dollars and state dollars and cut deals to see who can get what money to go where. But our education system couldn't be any worse. Okay. I brought in Kent Davis to talk about the Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs and the Alabama Department of Mental Health. If your department is mental health and we have all these mental health problems, the mental health isn't getting any better and you just keep throwing more money at it. It's the same fallacy as the public school situation. Okay, think about this. This is the public school situation we're in. The worse the education apparatus in the state does, the more money they get. Basic economics, you get more what you incentivize, less what you penalize. Okay, so if you give them more money for sucking, they're going to suck worse. Okay, that goes with mental health. Well, why isn't anyone's mental health getting better? We need more money. You give more money, mental health gets worse. Okay, the worse they do, the more money they get. That's the way that everything's structured. When is someone going to come in the state of Alabama and break that up? Who's going to cast a positive vision for the state, drawing from our heritage and infusing the people of Alabama with hope and a positive vision for the future? I'm going to close with this, okay? I wrote about this in my magazine article last time, and it's this. Think about a ship, like a Revolutionary era warship in the ocean, and it's sitting there and it's floating and it's got the sails and everything, okay? This old wooden ship, and it's sitting there on the waves in the wind, and that ship sitting there with no destination. If that ship is out in the ocean and it does not have a destination, the wind and the waves are going to crush that ship up against the rocks eventually. But if you give that same ship a destination, it will use that same wind and waves to get to its positive end, to get to its destination. And so that is this idea as a state, as a nation. You hear Trump doing it. He's constantly casting a positive vision. This is where we're going. This is how we're going to get there. Who is going to be that for our state? Who's going to come forward and say, this is my vision. This is our vision for an Alabama, a glorious Alabama, where children can read, okay, and special interests aren't reigning supreme, whatever it is, casting a positive vision for the state and getting people to buy in. That's the other thing. When there's a destination that's agreed upon, and there's a vision, we're going to go here, that's leadership, and people will sacrifice to be a part of a mission and a vision to go and get it. We haven't seen that in Alabama. We're so far away from it. I will say there's a lot of hope for this next governor's in 2026. There's some names in there that I do think you can even see a lot of some of the stuff that Will Ainsworth is saying and doing. He is probably the person who I've heard give the clearest vision of what Alabama could be and how to get our workforce going and everything like that. And I honestly think specifically Will Ainsworth, while Trump is in office, you would see him doing some radical things that would move things, shake things up, and do things where he would come under criticism from the left and he wouldn't care. I've watched him do it in other areas. Again, I've told you he's the reason we have school choice. He played a huge part of why we have school choice and why we have the grocery tax. Even as lieutenant governor, he's gotten a lot of good things done. And there's some other names that are being floated around about who might be governor in Alabama that would be amazing leaders as well. So I think we're coming up on Alabama having some positive leadership. I hope so. But that'll wrap it up for this week, guys. Until next time, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.